Our app journey started around 2 years ago when we launched what we call the Surf Patrol app here in the northern region of Surf Lifesaving New Zealand. So the original intention of the app was to reduce manual data entry by club administrators, which took up a huge amount of time. But then as the app was being developed, it kind of grew arms and legs and became a incident management tool for SurfCom and all that sort of thing. And eventually what we're hoping is that it'll roll out to the whole country and be a way that a common operating platform for all of them. We contracted a company called Lime Digital to build the app from scratch. Northern Region wanted to have ownership over all aspects of the project, but it's also meant that we've had ownership of all the issues as well. But basically the way it works is that each of the clubs or each of the patrols were issued with a tablet with a built-in application. And so they were able to enter data from that tablet. The initial launch of the app went really well. So we started off with our paid lifeguard service, which is different to our volunteer lifeguard service. And the paid lifeguards were given training on how to use the app when they had their start of season induction. That meant that when they started on the beaches, they were able to put in the app information into the app and had that training and the confidence to do it. And it was also part of their contractual obligations to be using that app. Those first few months where the paid lifeguard service were using it solely meant that we were able to iron out any of a lot of the usability issues, a lot of the data transfer issues, and that sort of thing. SurfCom, which is our central communications centre here in Northern Region, proved to be a really key player in ensuring that lifeguards were, one, using the app, like enforcing its use, and also for just checking the data that was coming through to make sure it was okay and looked generally correct. So what ended up happening is the paid lifeguards in New Zealand, they generally are also volunteer lifeguards. So they would take their knowledge of how to use the app back to their volunteer clubs and use the app when they were doing their volunteer patrols and teach other volunteer lifeguards how to use it. So it was kind of like a soft launch that organically started to be used by volunteer clubs. Once it was at a stage where it was a lot more usable, we started getting SurfCom to encourage the volunteer patrols to always be putting their information into the app. And so that first season, which was the 2019-2020 season, so last year, went actually really well. At the end of the season, that's when the major hurdles started to arrive for us. Obviously, COVID came along, so any kind of a lot of the emphasis and prioritization around the app kind of went out the window because all of a sudden we were just trying to adapt the surf lifesaving service and everything to COVID, and none of us knew what COVID was going to mean for surf lifesaving at the time. And so it got to about August, and we hadn't really done too much on the app because of the COVID disruption, and that meant that a lot of the planning for this coming season had to be done really, really quickly under a lot of pressure. Those delays meant that some of the initial intentions of the app, for example, that it be able to send data automatically into the national database and reduce that manual entry of data by club administrators, it hadn't happened before the start of the season. So that was a real disappointment for a lot of our clubs, and because that was the original intention of the whole app, was to get rid of that manual data entry. In a bid to appease clubs, where Northern Region maybe went a little bit wrong was just around our communications with that automatic data entry. So clubs were told that even if the automatic integration of the app into what we call the CRM, or our national database, wasn't completed by the start of the season, then their data would be stored in the app and it could be uploaded automatically at a later time. And also they were promised that it would be done by December at the very latest. What ended up happening is that we later turned out that we couldn't do that. So we couldn't upload the data post that had already been collected automatically. So that's now having to be put in manually by our Surfcom operators. And also it turned out that it wasn't until February that the integration has actually been achieved, just because of a lot of issues around trying to get access into different places and just building those bridges into our database. So I took over as the project lead on this in late February, just as the integration was completed. And tests have been running over the past few weekends, and the majority of data is now coming across correctly automatically into our database. But as with anything, there's always issues that need to be ironed out. So for example, sometimes when a IRB driver is put in as their role as IRB driver, which is the driver of our rescue boats, that means they'll come up as a rookie, which is like a junior lifeguard in New Zealand. So just ironing out a couple of those issues with transfer of information, but generally it's going well. The manual entry of the paperwork now is a bit more of a challenge, because as you can imagine, 22 patrol locations with a whole summer worth of data, that's no small feat to try and do. But we're making good progress on that now, and Surfcom's taken it over because it was a promise Northern Region made to the clubs. Their data would be uploaded at a later date and it wouldn't have to be done by club administrators. So what my number one lesson is from the Northern Region and New Zealand experience is just around only promising what you know can actually be delivered, and being clear and consistent in your messaging, particularly to volunteers, and also not overselling the products. For example, in Northern Region, I think a lot of everyone can see, or I think the majority of people can see the really positive benefits and the value add that the app has and will have in surf lifesaving. But it's just around at the moment, we're still in the progress of getting it up to speed and increasing the usability of it. So feedback is mixed, but generally positive. There's always opponents to change, which mostly explains most of the negative feedback we receive. But as I say, I think most clubs and all of the staff really see the benefit that the app brings. Surfcom staff really find it efficient, much more efficient for gathering information. So that's made a big difference there. Really reduced our non-emergency radio traffic, and has also helped to save lives, prevent major SAR events from unfolding, because information that previously wasn't available is now live and just a click away. As some of those other speakers have described, sometimes connectivity is a bit of an issue for us, just because we've got some patrols in really remote locations with no internet or no cell phone reception. But it's something we're working on, and we've made a lot of progress on this season. So in terms of the learnings, obviously that major learning, that big piece of feedback that I give to everyone is just around only promising what can be actually delivered. And also the second thing I'd say is just making sure that your app is as user-friendly as possible for all areas that are using it. So in our case, that's the lifeguards on the beach, the Surfcom operators here in the comm centre, and also the club administrators and staff who use the national database. So that's basically everything I had to say on this. In general, it's been a really good learnings and pathway, and we're really excited for where this can go, but it's not been without its challenges.